Imagine being asked to babysit your cousins during the holidays, but this time, you just can't do it. You've had enough, and you decide to say no. But what happens when your family gets disappointed and the guilt starts to eat at you? Was it the right decision, or did she cross a line? Stick around, because this is one holiday story you won't want to miss.
I honestly don't even know where to begin with this one. I've been going back and forth in my mind about whether I was being selfish or if I was actually in the right. But I guess it all started when Christmas was just around the corner, so a bit of background. I'm 18, and I come from a pretty big family. My mom is one of 5 siblings, so every year, Christmas is this huge family affair. All my aunts and uncles come over, and we spend the day at my grandparents' house. It's always loud, chaotic, and honestly, kind of exhausting. Don't get me wrong, I love my family, but as the oldest cousin, by a few years, I've always been the one they look to for help with the younger ones. The kids in my family are mostly under 10, and you know how it is. One second, they're fighting, the next, they're crying, and you're the one who has to step in and break it up. It's not always the worst thing in the world, but it gets old. Fast. Last year, I was a little more okay with it. I helped out with the kids, watched over them while the adults hung out in the living room. But this year, I was just done. I had been working my butt off in school, trying to keep up with all the assignments and deadlines. On top of that, I was stressed out about college applications. Christmas was supposed to be my break, a time to relax. All I wanted was a few days to do whatever I wanted, catch up on sleep, hang out with my friends, maybe even have some alone time for once. But of course, it's never that simple. About 2 weeks before Christmas, my mom brought up the subject casually, like it was nothing. You know, my name. You're going to have to help out with the cousins this year again, right? She said, like it was already decided. I immediately tensed up. I didn't want to say anything at first, but I could feel that familiar weight of responsibility creeping in. What do you mean, help out? I asked, trying to sound casual. Well, they're going to need someone to watch them while we're all hanging out. You're the oldest, so it's your job to make sure they're all okay. It's tradition. Tradition. It always comes down to that word, doesn't it? As if I have to do something just because we've always done it. I mean, sure, but I was kind of planning on just relaxing this year. I've been working really hard lately, and I'm kind of burned out. I said, trying to make my case, but already, I could tell this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. She didn't even seem to hear me. Well, we've always counted on you. Your cousins are looking forward to it. And right then, it hit me. They were always looking forward to it. They expected me to be the one to entertain them, the one to keep the peace when things got out of hand, the one who had to be the responsible adult. I had spent years being the go-to babysitter for all of them, but this year, I just didn't have it in me. I felt guilty even thinking about saying no, but the thought of spending yet another Christmas stuck babysitting, especially when I had been craving some downtime, made my stomach turn, so, after some internal debate, I decided to say something. Look, Mom, I love my cousins, but I really don't think I can do it this year. I need a break. I've been working so hard, and I just need some time to myself. Can you ask someone else? She went quiet for a second. It felt like an eternity. What do you mean, ask someone else? She finally asked, her tone sharp. I mean, I'm just not up for it this year. I want to relax, not be stuck watching the kids the whole time. I've done it before, and I just don't have the energy this time around. She stared at me like I had just said something outrageous. You know that's not how it works, right? You're the oldest cousin. It's your job to help out. It's Christmas, for God's sake. And that's when it started, the guilt. My mom's disappointment hung in the air like a cloud. It was clear she didn't understand. She didn't see how much I needed this time for myself. All she saw was the tradition, the expectation, and how I was letting it all fall apart by not fulfilling my role. I tried to explain more, but it felt pointless. She was already upset, and I could see it in her face. I just don't think it's fair to always ask me to do it. I need to focus on myself this time. Please understand. She didn't say anything else after that. Instead, she walked out of the room, leaving me there, feeling like the world's worst daughter. The days leading up to Christmas felt off. Every time I passed my mom, she would shoot me a look, like she was trying to gauge whether I'd change my mind. I could feel the tension between us building, and when my dad joined in, saying, "Your mom's right. You really should help out this year." I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but then I reminded myself, this was supposed to be my time. I had been so stressed out with everything, and this holiday was supposed to be my escape. My mental health was already in a fragile state, and being stuck babysitting all day wasn't going to help. I wasn't a child anymore. I didn't owe it to anyone to give up all my free time just because they'd always relied on me. Yet, every time someone brought it up, I felt like I was being painted as the villain. My mom would tell me how much everyone was counting on me, especially my younger cousins. I knew she was trying to guilt trip me, but hearing it out loud still hurt. She made it sound like it was some kind of moral obligation I couldn't back out of on Christmas Eve. It all came to a head. My aunt called me, asking if I was still on for babysitting the next day. She said something like, "The kids are so excited to see you, and you're really the best with them." I could tell she was trying to flatter me into saying yes, but it didn't work. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm really sorry, but I can't do it this year. I've been feeling really burnt out, and I just need to focus on myself this time." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then my aunt's voice changed. She sounded disappointed, almost hurt. "Well, I guess we'll have to figure something else out. It's a shame, though." Her words stung, and suddenly I felt like the most selfish person on earth. I just wanted to make everything easier, to do what was expected of me, but every time I tried to help, it felt like I was losing myself in the process. I was starting to question if maybe I was just being a spoiled brat. Maybe I should have just sucked it up and gone along with it. But then, just as I was about to spiral into that familiar place of self-doubt, I remembered something that I'd been trying to avoid. Why do I have to be the one to do this every year? I love my cousins, but I wasn't their babysitter. I wasn't a robot programmed to just do what everyone asked. I had my own life, my own responsibilities. And this year, I needed to put myself first. Still, when I walked into the kitchen on Christmas morning, the atmosphere felt tense. My mom was there, looking like she had been holding back something all morning. She greeted me with a forced smile, but I could see the disappointment lingering in her eyes. "Morning," I said, trying to keep it casual. "Morning," she replied, her tone flat. "Your cousins are going to be so sad you're not helping out today. They really look up to you." I just nodded, not really knowing how to respond. I had already said my piece, and I wasn't going to apologize for wanting a break. But I couldn't help but feel the weight of her words. Later that day, when we all gathered around the Christmas tree, I saw my cousins running around, laughing, playing games with the adults, and in that moment, something shifted inside me. There they were, all having a great time. And I realized they weren't as dependent on me as I thought. In fact, they were perfectly happy without me being their full-time babysitter. My younger cousins were entertained by everyone else, and the family seemed to get along just fine. It was like I had built up this huge fear that if I wasn't there to take charge, everything would fall apart. But it didn't. That realization felt like a weight lifted off my chest. Maybe I wasn't the only one who could handle things. Maybe it wasn't just my responsibility to keep everyone entertained. But just as I was starting to feel a sense of relief, my mom pulled me aside. She didn't yell, but her voice was firm. "I'm just disappointed, that's all," she said quietly. "I didn't think you'd let us down like this, especially during Christmas." Her words stung, and for a second, I started second-guessing myself again. Had I really let her down? Was I being too selfish? But then, something inside me clicked. I had been trying so hard to be the perfect daughter, the perfect cousin, the perfect niece, and in the process, I'd forgotten about what I needed. I was allowed to have boundaries. I was allowed to take time for myself, especially after everything I'd been through leading up to the holidays. I looked at my mom, took a deep breath, and said, "I'm really sorry if you're disappointed, but I need to be honest. I can't always be the one to step in. I love everyone, but I also need to take care of myself. I hope you can understand that." There was a long pause before she sighed and nodded. "I understand," she said, though I could tell she wasn't completely happy about it. But at least she wasn't angry anymore. The rest of Christmas Day was surprisingly peaceful, given the tension earlier. My cousins had moved on from their disappointment, and the adults were busy chatting and catching up. At some point, my younger cousins stopped running around and joined the adults for presents. I could see them enjoying themselves without needing my constant attention, and I felt a strange mix of pride and relief. Why Mom, though, still seemed a little distant. We didn't talk much after that conversation, but every time I caught her eye, I could tell she was still processing what I'd said. There was a sense of finality to it. She didn't argue anymore, but I could see she was still hurt. It stung to know that she didn't fully understand why I had made my decision, but part of me knew that I couldn't make everyone happy all the time, especially at my own expense. It wasn't until later that evening, after most of the guests had left and we were all winding down, that my mom and I ended up in the kitchen together. She was putting away leftovers, and I was just kind of standing there, unsure of what to say. It felt like the perfect moment to maybe clear the air a bit. She finally broke the silence. "You know, I don't want to fight about this anymore," she said, looking down at the dishes. "But I hope you understand. It's hard for me to see you not want to help. You're the oldest, and I think I just want you to be that role model for your cousins. They look up to you." I hesitated, unsure how to respond. This was the same argument she'd given me 1,000 times, but it didn't feel as sharp now. It felt more like an attempt to bridge the gap between us. I could tell she didn't want this to hang over us forever. "I know," I said softly. "I get why you want me to help, and I know it's a tradition, but it's also okay to change things sometimes. It's okay for me to have a break too. I want to be there for my cousins, but I also need to be there for myself." She didn't say anything for a moment, and I worried I hadn't gotten through to her. But then she sighed, and when she spoke again, her tone was softer. "I guess I've just been used to you always stepping up, and I didn't realize how much you needed a break." She paused, glancing at me. "Maybe I was expecting too much from you this year." The weight of her words hit me, and for the first time all day, I felt like maybe she actually understood. I wasn't just some selfish teenager to her. I was someone who had her own needs and boundaries. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as wrong as I had thought. "I'm sorry if I hurt you," I said, looking down at the counter. "I never meant to make you feel like I didn't care about our family. I do, but I just needed to take care of myself too." She reached out and gave my hand a quick squeeze. "I get it, and I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, even if it's hard for me to let go of some of those old expectations." I smiled, a weight lifting off my chest. "Thanks, Mom." As we finished cleaning up together, I felt like the tension between us had started to ease. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and I knew there would be more conversations like this in the future, but for now, it felt like we were both learning to see things from each other's perspectives. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I thought about everything that had happened. For the first time in a long while, I felt okay with the decision I had made. I hadn't just done what everyone expected. I had listened to myself and recognized that my needs mattered too. Maybe next year, I'd be more willing to help out with the kids, but only if I was truly in the right mental space for it. And maybe I'd stop feeling so guilty for taking time for myself. The next few days after Christmas felt surprisingly calm. My mom and I didn't talk about the babysitting situation again, but I could tell there was a quieter understanding between us. It was like we'd both been holding our breath for a while, waiting for the other to make a move, and now the air had cleared. However, the lingering self-doubt I had felt before Christmas still crept in every now and then. Every time I saw my cousins or interacted with my extended family, a little voice in the back of my head whispered that maybe I should have stepped up. Maybe I should have sacrificed my time for everyone else like I had in the past. After all, family was supposed to come first, right? It wasn't until New Year's Eve that I really started to reflect on everything. The whole family had gathered for a small celebration at my aunt's house. As usual, my cousins were running around, laughing and playing games. And as usual, I was sitting on the sidelines, feeling a little bit like an outsider. But this time, I wasn't stressed. I wasn't constantly checking the clock or wondering if I was missing out on something by not playing the helper role. Then, my aunt, who had been the one who originally asked me to babysit, pulled me aside while everyone else was busy with the countdown. She had a serious look on her face, and for a split second, I panicked, wondering if I had somehow ruined Christmas by standing my ground. "Hey," she said softly, "I just wanted to say something. I've been thinking about what happened with the babysitting, and I feel like maybe I should have been more understanding. I didn't realize how much you needed a break." Her words caught me off guard. For all the guilt and pressure I'd been feeling since Christmas, this moment felt like a quiet acknowledgement of my needs. It was like she was telling me that it was okay to have boundaries, even with family. I appreciate you saying that, I replied, genuinely surprised. It's been hard for me to know where to draw the line sometimes, especially with family, but it felt like this year, I really needed to just step back. She nodded, looking thoughtful. I understand. You've been a big help for so many years, and sometimes people forget that you're not just the helper. You're a person too. I didn't know what to say to that. My aunt had always been kind to me, but this moment felt different, more like a recognition of my growth, and the fact that I was no longer willing to be the go-to babysitter or the default caretaker. I was allowed to take care of myself, and that wasn't something I should apologize for. Before I could respond, my aunt reached over and gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. I'm proud of you for speaking up, she added softly. I'm sure it wasn't easy. It's a hard balance to find, but you did the right thing. I felt a warmth spread through me at her words. It wasn't the kind of validation I had expected, but it was the kind that made me realize I hadn't made the wrong decision after all. My family wasn't going to collapse just because I wasn't the one running after the kids. They could still have fun, and I could still enjoy the holiday in my own way as the night went on. I started to feel more comfortable in my own skin. The guilt that had been hanging over me was finally starting to fade. I wasn't selfish for taking a break. I was just prioritizing my own well-being. And that didn't make me a bad person. It made me a person who knew her limits. By the time midnight rolled around, and we were all cheering for the new year, I found myself feeling grateful, not just for the family I had, but for the growth I'd experienced. I hadn't realized it at the time, but this Christmas had been a turning point for me, a time when I learned to stand up for myself, even when it meant disappointing people I loved. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when I felt guilty for choosing myself, but I knew it was the right decision. My mom had made her peace with it. My aunt had, too. And slowly, I was making peace with it as well. I wasn't the a-hole. I was just someone who had learned to find balance in a world that constantly asked me to give more than I had. As the days passed into the new year, the emotional weight of Christmas began to lift, and I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. I was still adjusting to this new version of myself, the one who could say no when necessary without feeling like the world was falling apart. But honestly, I was proud of that growth. It wasn't easy, and I still had moments of doubt, but I felt stronger knowing that I could set boundaries and still be a good family member. Over the next few months, I continued to find that balance. I started to say no more often, not just to my family, but to other aspects of life too. It felt empowering to know that I could take care of myself without constantly feeling like I had to play the role of the perfect helper. And as much as it was uncomfortable at first, I was learning that doing what was best for me didn't make me selfish. It made me a healthier, happier version of myself. And when the next holiday rolled around, I didn't feel that old pressure weighing on me. I'd learned to communicate my needs, and I saw that my family had learned to respect them too. The world didn't end because I didn't babysit, and everyone still had a good time. Maybe, just maybe, I had become the role model I was meant to be, not by sacrificing my well-being for others, but by showing them that it's okay to take a step back and focus on yourself when you need to.
So, what do you think? Was she the a-hole for refusing to babysit her cousins during Christmas? Or was she just setting healthy boundaries for herself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did she handle it well, or could she have done things differently? Let's hear your take.